Hey everybody, how's it going and welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to continue our series on dissecting assets from AAA games. And this time we're going to make a change because we've been doing characters so far. We are going to do weapons from a first-person shooter. Now, weapons from a first-person shooter are very different than weapons from a third-person game or any other type of game. These ones are very particular. And we have a game that a lot of people love till this day. It's called Cyberpunk 2077. And let's get started. Alright, here we are in Blender. And as you can see, this is just a model. This thing looks very high poly. It's beautiful. It's actually very well optimized, but we'll talk about why this weapon looks the way it does in a little bit. I just want you to note something. It's very important when it comes to making assets. What type of game are you making the assets for? And this goes for when you're making a portfolio because you want to get a job in the industry. They want to see that you have a purpose. Art is not just, I make this pretty thing, come hire me. When it comes to game art or even VFX, art has a purpose and has some technical aspects to it. In this case, because we are dealing with a first-person shooter game, the weapon is going to be literally in the camera all the time. It's going to be in the face of the player. So this means that this weapon must have more geometry than your average weapon in other types of games because the player is looking directly at it. There are certain things that you can get away from using normals, but for the most part, you're going to need to be smart about using geometric pieces. So as you can see, this is an in-game weapon. This is the Ajax rifle. And you can see things are modeled. These are not normals. These are modeled. These rivets or screws, however you want to call these are not normal maps. Same thing with these ridges right here. This is geometry. And the reason for it is because it's a first-person shooter. You have it like this. If it was normal maps, you could tell it was just a texture. And for a game that was supposed to be next gen, back in the day was next gen, now it's current gen, it needs to look very high-end. So if you're new to 3D, this is one of the key differences between making stuff organic or hard surface. When it's hard surface, first of all, things do not deform, so you don't need polygons in very specific ways. And second of all, you're going to see that the model looks a little bit different in terms of this has a lot more triangles. All right, let me show you how I usually make things quads. And again, this is just so we can see a little bit better of the initial geometry. It's by no means perfect because this is Blender trying to calculate things. But if we go Alt J, then you can see part of the flow of the geometry here. And again, because this is hard surface and certain things are not going to be deforming, you do not mind having as many triangles. So over here, instead of having a bajillion polygons, you can just finish these all into a point. You can see that this circle right here, which is a dense-ish circle, it actually finished in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 points. And this has several more points than that. Now, what this does is it allows you to have more geometry in this without increasing the poly count. So I think, in my opinion, I know some people would disagree, but I think making hard surface is a lot more technical than making organics because you can optimize a lot more, so you have to think a lot on what are you going to be optimizing. So you can see all these rivets, which would create a lot of very high poly count, they're all finished into a point. But because this is hard surface and this surface is completely flat, the fact that we have all these lines going into one point does not affect, and this isn't going to be deforming. That's very important because things are not deforming. You can get away with things like this. So look at all of these. This could all be, add a lot of geometry, but instead they all finish into a point, and you have this very nice looking ridge over here for like I think that's the bump stock. I'm sorry, I'm not very well versed in this kind of lingo for weapons. All right, so what I did is I just isolated from the magazines and the decals. We're going to talk about decals in a second. Let's see if we go into edit mode, if we can bring out some parts. So as you can see, I just want to see if this is, let's go here into polygons. And just as I thought, this is not part of the whole geometry, because again, why? So the whole thing is you finish this into a point, so it's where the screw goes, but you can get the screw a little bit more dense and you don't have to have the screw be part of it. So here we go into the model and you can see how this actually finishes. So this is a little bit of a different geometry than the hole that it goes into, just to make things a little bit, more malleable, because there is no reason why this needs to be one complete piece of geometry that goes into this. This can be separate pieces, and it also helps when UVing, when unwrapping these things. It helps a lot if they are separated. Let's go and look at these over here. Yep. Just as I thought, this is not one single piece of geometry. It's just something that goes into and clips through, which is fine. The player's not going to notice that. You don't have to make everything watertight. I'll just say, because I've seen some people that model stuff like that. Everything is watertight, and sometimes that can be detrimental to the process. The barrel of the gun. This thing has to be pretty round, because otherwise, the player is too close to it. You don't want the player to be having a barrel that looks like an hexagon unless it's a very particular game. But when it comes to first-person shooters, you can see how intricate this model is, even in this part right here. And again, you say, well, the player is looking at the weapon this way. Why am I focusing so much? Let me unhide everything. Why am I focusing so much on the front of the gun? Well, in this case of Cyberpunk, you do pick up the weapons. Weapons are usually laying down on the floor, although I'm sure that the ones laying down on the floor use LODs and are not as high-end as this one. But when I was searching the file, I also didn't see LODs being separated, so I don't know if it's something that the engine makes, because the other games that we've had on the channel, they do have different LODs as a separate mesh. So, all right, another thing, if you're making weapons, usually the magazine goes separate. So you can see here the geometry, pretty good. Again, don't mind the triangles, but the magazine is, I'd say 99% of the time, the magazines for weapons in first-person shooters are a separate thing, because you need a reload animation. Every first-person shooter, at least in modern times, I'd say even those that are retro-ish, they do have some sort of reload animation, and you need a magazine for that. So that's why this isn't part of the base model. Same deal with the iron sights. You can see the iron sights is just a separate piece, because you can customize this weapon and add different types of iron sights. There's also a silencer model that I didn't bring in because it was just a cylinder. So it wasn't nothing special about it. But you can see the iron sights, very high geometry, again, for a low poly hard surfaced acid, but this is going to be in your face, in the face of the player, so it needs to have certain density and the detail needs to be in them. So very important, if you're going to make a weapon for a first-person shooter, the detail has to be there. You cannot get away with normals, because this is how the player is going to look at it. If you have normals, then the illusion breaks and you're going to be told by journalists that your game is outdated, and no company wants that these days. All right, before we move to the texturing, I want to show you the decals. So you can see this floating squares. These are decals. Decals usually act as one face. That's why it's just like one square, one polygon. So the reason for this is so you can have customized visuals that are going to be changing over and over. So these weapons usually change a lot on the things they say, the color. So it's easier if those little details that do get a lot to the model, you have them this way as decals. This is kind of like a pipeline engine thing. Not every game does it this way, but I've seen it done in Cyberpunk, and I think it's a very cool way of just being part of that customization. And you're going to see what these things do when we are in the shading portion, or texturing, if you want to call it that. All right, so let's go to the UV portion. So go into UV editing, and you're going to see, because there are several maps here. And one of the things that's very particular about Cyberpunk is all of these maps are usually masks. You're going to see that they all say mask, mask set. They're all masks. And what that allows is for them to use more procedural noises. And you can see this metal generic bear, metal generic rolled. And this is kind of like the normal map that they applied, but is not a normal map that is particular. It is a normal map that is more geared towards being procedural. Quick correction here. This is not actually procedural. This is all using one single texture map that works with the masks that we just saw. I know I kept saying over and over procedural, but once I checked it again, this is not what qualifies as procedural. Sorry about that. And now that we're going to go into the shading portion where you can see the actual texture, I call it shading because this doesn't have like a texture map that we've seen for like Marvel Rivals or Assassin's Creed, where it's a particular texture map. This is a more procedural way to do it, and it's because this game is so big and has so many weapons. So you can see it kind of looks low resolution. These masks are not as low resolution once you see it outside in Blender. To me, unwrapping things in the hard surface, I think it's a little bit less intricate than unwrapping things that are not hard surface, like organics, because you can see that there's a ton of UV islands, like a lot of UV islands. So you can see the biggest UV islands allocated to this portion right here, because it's closer to the player, very logical. But most of the parts, you know, there's very little UVs just laying around, all because of the way this thing is being textured. And it's all about the mask. So you're going to see when we jump into the shading portion, I'm not going to make this part of the UV a long one because, again, when it comes to seams in hard surface stuff, you just cut seams when your angle change and in a way that it doesn't interrupt your baking. This isn't something that I can say do it this way because it's not one and done. It depends on what you're doing. So you just go, of course, if you can hide your seams, you hide your seams. But if not, then just go. And when you change an angle, you make a seam right there. It's not going to be a big deal. It's not going to look bad, and it's not going to affect the baking. In the case of these barrels, the cylinders, usually you just break the seam. Usually I would break it in the underneath part and then just unwrap the whole cylinder. Unwrapping the cylinder is not a big deal. It's unwrapping a sphere. It's unwrapping a sphere that's usually very hard, but unwrapping a cylinder, it's pretty straightforward. All right, so let's move to shading. And in shading over here, you can see how intricate the shader is for this. And it has to do with the fact that this model has so many masks, and they just want to use the normal maps and the mask at the same time so they can customize, they can change things on the fly, and it's easier. Now, why do I have the shading right here this way? It's because there is a plugin. You know that Cyberpunk has modding tools, so there is a plugin to bring models straight out from Cyberpunk into Blender. And of course, you have to use the model tool in between, and it will give you the shader for the weapon inside Blender. So I'm positive this is mimicking how they shade the weapon because how good this looks. I didn't do anything to it. I just exported out and used the add-on, and it brought it this way. You can see all the detail. It's insane. All of this is, of course, normal maps, and you can see the difference. And the roughness maps, you can see that everything is very well laid out. And just like I mentioned, it's all due to masks. It's all due to masks. You can see it's painted right here, right here. But you can see the variations between normals, between the magazine and the rest of the gun. You can see also the difference in metalness and color between the rivets and the rest of the gun. Even though the gun is, whole gun's made of metal, but it is painted metal and it has different kind of feels. So this is what makes these guns look so amazing when it comes to in-game. Now, this probably didn't make a great shader for this part right here for the iron sight for in-game, but now let's go into the decals. So I already talked about the decals, how they are just one piece of geometry, and the reason why they're one piece of geometry is because you just add them and you can just change them around and you can just project it into an already determined geometry. So if we go here, you can see that there is some write-up of here, restrictive use for corporate enforcement use only. That's great. But you can see that these are all decals. So it's not a texture that's part of this because this is using a mask. So that also has to do with the fact that they're using a decals, not only for customization, but also because you are using mask for the texturing of this gun. If you didn't use decals, then masking this and adding these inside a texture would probably not be very smart. So I get now why they use decals on this. And you can see because they are decals, they also look pretty high resolution. Well, maybe not this, it's not a great example, but these two. You can see the code written on the gun right here. I don't think the player is going to usually get this close to this part, but it's, it's awesome that it's laid out that way. And I think it's pretty cool that they made a tool where you can see these things in Blender. So breaking down the shader, this is the shader for the decals. Very simple. When it comes to optimization, this is also a very good way to optimize your game. Is you use in-game shaders as opposed to use a lot of texture maps. So every texture map that you load has a particular size, and that size has to go into the memory. And if you can make the shader not have to load that many textures, that's also great for the game. If you can use the in-engine shader, so I'm going to give you the example of Unreal because it's what I know. Your game will run better if you have more shaders that are made in-game and are not dependent on textures that you brought into the engine. This is also why art has a purpose when it comes to video games. It's not just because you want your game to look in a particular way. It also helps with the optimization. And I think even though a lot of people didn't like the game, I think Marathon did something very, very cool when it came to the art. If you want me to talk about that, leave it in the comment section down below. But I have some things to say about the art in Marathon when it comes to the technical aspect from what I saw. The art, even though to me it looks gorgeous, I know some people disagree, but to me the game looks pretty nice and the art also serves a big purpose. All right, before we end, I want to mention something, and this has to do with the industry. Usually, if you are on Twitter, which follow me, link in the description, a lot of people like to say, oh, you should use this tool, you should use Blender, blah, blah, blah. I always say that you should use the tool that works best for you, because they're going to hire you, and I'm speaking to the 3D artists here, they're going to hire you based on your portfolio, not exactly on the tools that you use. And this is a good example. People outside of CD Projekt Red don't have access to the Red engine. The Red engine, as far as I know, it's not something that's sold to the public in general. So there is no way for you as an artist to be trained in the Red engine. And that's what I mean by it doesn't matter the tools that you use. Each company, if you're aiming at AAA, each company has a pipeline. Once you get in, you will be trained on that pipeline. So that means whether you use Maya, whether you use Blender, whatever you use, if you're good at it, you're going to get a job. It doesn't matter if this tool or this tool is not industry standard. you getting a job depends on your work, not necessarily on the tools you use, because I was trained in 3D Studio Max. I use Blender all the time at my day job. We used to use 3D Studio Max. Skills are always transferable when it comes to DCC apps. So if you are a Blender user and you see AAA company, AAA companies are using Maya or whatnot, you jumping into Maya is not going to be that difficult. If your work is great, you will be hired. There will be a little bit of onboarding time for you to get trained in the tools that they're using, because even if you are fantastic, let's say they use Maya at the company you want to work with, and you are fantastic using Maya, that company has very particular scripts and tools that they have designed for the pipeline. You are not going to know them because they are particular to that company. So you will need training. That's what I mean when I say it doesn't matter the tools that you use. As long as you are good, you will get a job. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching all the way till this point. As always, remember, leave a like and leave a comment. It really helps the channel get out there. Remember, if you want me to take a look at the marathon stuff, because I have some thoughts to say about the art style of that game, remember to subscribe if you haven't, ring that bell for notification, all that. Links in the description for all my socials, and I'll see you in the next one.